Basically, a lot of it is behavioral. And so you could be making, $30,000 a year, $40,000 a year. But if you do everything sort of right, you can accumulate a substantial amount of wealth by the time you're 60, and you can have millions of dollars by the time you're 60. And this is kind of what you have to do. There's kind of basic components to this, right? In terms of building wealth and how to actually get there. And this is the same thing with professors. If you're thinking of doing this route, and I'm not being sort of facetious and being or extravagant or sort of promoting all this kind of stuff and saying that this is possible. It's really tough. Most people are going to struggle at this stuff, right? Like real life gets in the way, and that's kind of the lesson here is that life is very complicated, and life can make you go in certain directions and make it difficult to sort of build wealth. But this is what people will do if they want to accumulate wealth. And this is across all makes and models, all kind of people, in terms of, careers, all sorts of stuff to think about this. All right. So the first thing, I think this is the most important thing, is just being really intentional about your finances and actually thinking about it. You'd be surprised how many people actually just don't think about it until, they're 50, 60 years old. And then they start thinking about, ooh, have I accumulated wealth at this moment? And really what you should be doing is thinking about, being intentional all the way through. And so what I would recommend for you to do, just pick up a finance book, a personal finance book, and just start sort of flipping through it. It's going to save you a world of hurt. And the sooner you do that, and the sooner you sort of start thinking about this kind of stuff, the better off you're going to be. So it seems really, I know it's totally nerdy, but I want you to be wealthy. I want you to actually do things in your life and be able to do things later on in your life that you can accumulate wealth. Or you can do things that are just wonderful that you wouldn't have been able to do before, right? So a huge component of building wealth is sort of trading off the sort of things that feel good right now, and using some of those resources that you would have done that to make you feel good right now, and sort of applying it and saving it for something in the future, right? So reading a finance book, it sucks. It's boring. Most people are not going to really get excited about that. Some people sort of do a good job of this, and some people don't. In terms of writing finance books, most of them are really boring. But if you make that investment right now, and you know that you're making this investment, it's terrible, you're going to gain some knowledge that are hopefully going to allow you to accumulate wealth, and then you're going to be better off in the future. So it stinks right now for the benefit in the future, right? That's an important thing to think about. So you might spend a little bit of time, and maybe it's a weekend or a couple, maybe it's 3 weeks at nighttime of your life, or a month of your life at nighttime reading before bed, in terms of understanding how you accumulate wealth. But that's going to give you a world of benefit in the future. And it's not really all that complicated in any sort of way. I don't want you to read anything that's related to getting rich quick, any of that kind of stuff, how to make money in a year, and how to sort of be extremely wealthy within the next 6 months, any of that kind of stuff. How to play stocks on the stock market. That's most of that stuff is garbage, and it's not going to benefit you in any sort of way. You're going to lose a bunch of money doing that. And I guarantee you're going to lose a bunch of money doing that. It's just very, very risky. And that's not how you accumulate wealth, or most people don't accumulate wealth that way. The odd person, so maybe it's 1 of a million, are going to accumulate wealth that way. And they're going to tell a lot of people about that. And then you're going to be really excited about it, right? But it is just really impossible to do that. And I want you to focus on that. So again, like these YouTube videos, right? I'm not getting rich on YouTube in any sort of sense, or any one particular video is actually making me any sort of money. It's peanuts, right? But if you accumulate all these different videos all together, it actually starts adding up to not a lot, but enough that you could see some value in that, right? That is actually worthwhile to do, and that's how you actually build wealth. You just keep doing sort of small, tiny actions repeatedly for a very, very long time. Okay, and that really leads me to the second point in terms of professors that are very wealthy, and they tend to save money, and they tend to invest every single day of their life. So they're going to start out, once they're done their PhD, or done, once they start working, they're going to save some portion of their gross income. So how much money they're actually making in a year. So let's say you make $10,000 in a year. It's a really low amount. That's, most people in the United States can't live off of that. But anyways, let's say you make $10,000 a year. We save $1,000 every single year for 30 years or 40 years. And you pocket that, you put that someplace, you put it in some sort of investment, and then that's going to pan out to substantial amounts of money. And the reason is that that money gets, it grows through compound interest, and it's kind of a miracle kind of thing. But basically what you're getting is interest on interest when you have compound interest. So the first year, let's say you make 10% on that. So you have $1,000, you saved $1,000 for a year and you put in an investment, you make 10% on that. Well, that second year, you're gonna have $1,000 and $100, so $1,100. Then the next year, you invest that again, right? So the $1,100 you invest it, and you get interest on that $1,100 instead of $1,000, right? So it's this long history of actually accumulating wealth through compound interest, or accumulating a portion of your salary through compound interest is what's actually going to generate a tremendous amount of wealth for you. And a good rule of thumb is to save about 10 to 15% of your gross income. So this is how much you total make, and you aim for 10 to 15%. So I do a little bit more than 15%. The reason is that you can sort of change it around to sort of tax laws. If you do a Roth IRA, for example, you can accumulate a little bit more than the sort of 15% based on sort of pre-tax income. It's a little bit more complicated than I wanted to get into, but a good book, again, is going back to the Dave Ramsey stuff, and he's actually pretty, genuine, actually the real deal. So I'd recommend for you to actually look at that. But basically, you're looking at 10 to 15% of your income. If you make $100,000, you sock away $15,000 a year, right? So you take $15,000, you sock it away and invest it somehow. And you just get in the habit of doing that. And so you want to shrink that amount. You shrink how much you're living off of, and then you just live off of the smaller amount. And then you keep contributing to some sort of investment fund. Now, the investment fund, I'm not going to get into that component of it, but basically you want some sort of growth fund, growth index fund of some sort, or focusing on things that are actually growing in the economy, businesses that are actually growing in the economy, and it's some sort of index or mutual fund or something like that. So growth stock mutual fund or an index fund, doesn't really matter. They're both going to be pretty good in any way that you look at it. So Dave Ramsey has kind of a criteria. It works in terms of his criteria, but you can also do an index fund as well. But basically, just a really simple way of investing. And that's what I would recommend in terms of doing that. You're just buying stocks across the board in many different companies across the United States, across the world. You're basically buying into the economy and the companies that are actually growing at a substantial rate, right? That's all you're doing. And you do that for 20 to 30 years, right? So yes, okay, that seems really easy to do. And that's the third point I want to point out is, investing seems really easy to do, but it's 20 to 30 years of your life that you have to do that. And that is hard for almost everybody. Across the world, doesn't matter where you're from, it is really difficult. Most of us forget to invest. Most of us, life happens. So maybe you have a funeral or a death in your family. Maybe, you have more kids than you'd expected. There is just so many things that happen in your life that can sort of meddle with that. Maybe you have, something crazy happens. So let's say you start a little side business, for example, and it just loses a bunch of money on you. And then you start, dumping a bunch of money into it, right? So there's all sorts of things, crazy life things that happens. And so it's very tricky to sort of package it off and be able to invest for 20 to 30 years and at any income, right? So most people will struggle with this. And this is the tricky part, right? And so that's why there's actually a huge amount of behavioral research on this right now in terms of, Richard Thaler's work and stuff, who won the Nobel Prize in economics recently. There is just large components of research that's trying to figure out how to actually get people to do these things behaviorally rather than we know how to do this kind of stuff, but how do you actually do this stuff? And it's actually pretty easy in the sense that you just have to do it intentionally. You have to sit down and actually make these investments, actually talk to an investment advisor on maybe it's an annual basis. The first thing, I don't want you to talk to them every single year. What I want you to do is just talk to them once and set it up once. That's and once you've done that, the rest of it is all just gravy. And I guarantee, I'm serious about this. This is going to be the trickiest thing for you. Okay, so then the fourth thing in terms of professors that are rich and wealthy is that they tend to build wealth because they're very generous with their time and energy, right? So professors that do well in the classroom, they're very generous to students in terms of not just, giving them grades and all that kind of, that's not what I mean, but they're generous in their time and energy. They spend a lot, they invest a lot in their students. They invest a lot in, maybe it's research, for example, their time and energy. They invest a lot into, participating in different things. They just kind of want to help other people out, right? At the end of the day, that's really what generosity is. You want to help other people out, make sure that they perform and do well. Other people perform. And the more that you do that, the more that you've figured out how to leverage, how to do this. So leverage meaning like finding something that actually is scalable, that other people can sort of see this stuff, the more that you're going to build wealth in the long run. And this is kind of universal across, maybe as businesses. If you have a small business, for example, if you figure out how to do something that's scalable and that you can help out not just like 5 people, but hundreds of thousands of people, and then you figured out how do you actually take some of the value that you've created. And I'm not saying like being greedy in any sort of way, but just figure out how to appropriate some of that value just a little bit. You can become very, very wealthy. And that's how professors actually will build wealth, is through generosity and trying to help out other people with their time and energy. If you didn't know that, that's kind of the story behind it, right? Is just being a nice, decent human being. Because why is that the case? Is because you get more opportunities and more people just want to help you out because they see that you're a decent human being trying to do things that actually make sense and they help other people, right? So to give you an example, let's say you are a professor and you're very generous with your time with students in the classroom and people just know you as a decent human being and they really like what you're doing. Well, most people are going to forget that. But maybe there's one person in 10 years, they think back and they're like, oh, you know what, this professor was really cool. I'm going to ask him for some advice. And they ask that some advice on a particular business, and pretty soon there's a relationship that's formed. And that one person says, well, can you invest a little bit in this business? And it grows, right? And the business grows and you actually become the business becomes a big thing, right? And that's actually a real story that happens a lot repeatedly for professors because they're kind of in a position where they can get access to these different opportunities that other people can't get. And the professors that are wealthy across the board are the ones that have seen this and they've been very generous with their time, either in the research sense and they've really focused on research and built up sort of a platform of, maybe it's a series of patents, for example, or that they have helped out various different businesses and some of them actually took off and they created a massive startup or something along those lines. So that's how you build wealth.